I am thrilled to introduce today's guest on the Unveil podcast, Dr. Asha Rani. Dr. Asha has been a practicing periodontist for over 20 years in New York City. In addition to private practice, she's a professor of dental implant surgery training and a part of Revive Mission, a dental outreach program that serves in the underprivileged areas of the Dominican Republic. We do not talk about dentistry today, by the way, because outside of dentistry, Asha is a best-selling author, public speaker, and a Reiki practitioner who deeply believes in the importance of self-care and personal wellness. Her recent book, titled Who Is She?, was ranked #1 new release in 4 categories and sheds light on the journey beyond being a mother, wife, and daughter. And that is the topic of today's conversation with Asha. I was amazed by Asha's bravery and her boldness and her commitment to self, which is rare in today's day and age. And so I'm not going to do too much more of an introduction. This is a beautiful conversation. And if you're interested in how to become a bit more connected to your soul's purpose, not the identities and the roles and the hats that you wear, this is the episode to listen to. So without further ado, I hope that you enjoy my podcast with Dr. Asha Rani. Asha Rani, it is a delight to welcome you to the Unveil podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation, basically because it's going to be different for my listeners. It's not something that is a message that I think I've had on this show before. That's not a bad thing. I definitely think it's a message that should be heard loud and clear, far and wide. With that little teaser for my audience, would you like to just share what your big mission is in this life and the message that you're sharing with the world and women at this moment in time?
So my big mission in life, sometimes we talk about what's my purpose, and I feel like it's more to explore and create because, I'm 46 years old.
And Shush, you never are.
And I've done a lot of the must-dos in life, the checklist. And now it's time to get rid of that and just kind of feel through what it is that I want to do, what it is that I like. So I feel like saying I'm here to constantly reinvent and create myself. And I hope that also creates a spark in other women to know that it's never too late to do anything it is that you want to do. Because you're here in this one lifetime, make it count, So that's what I feel like my mission is.
And I love this. And you have recently written a best-selling book which came out in January called Who Is She? The Journey Beyond Being a Mother, Wife, and Daughter, which I think gives a lot away about all of this. But what I want to understand is not only where this book came from, but how did you get to being this passionate person about female empowerment and life beyond just the conventional female roles? So where did you start with all of this? Like, give us the life history.
I think as a kid, and all of us as kids are these magical beings where you just are, and you just kind of do whatever feels joyful without worrying about what everybody else is going to think. And then somewhere along the line, you're in society, and then you behave the way you're supposed to behave. So I think for me, I was always the good kid. Followed the rules, did what I was supposed to do. And in that, I thought that I was happy because I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. So of course, I'm living the best life. But somewhere along the line, as you start to gain a little bit more life experience, and in my particular life, having a partner, having children, having the house, having all of these things that are a blessing, but still feeling unfulfilled, that was a big turning point for me because I knew something wasn't right. I didn't know what to pinpoint. I didn't know how to even face any of that because there's shame in feeling like you're not happy when technically you have everything that society tells you you're supposed to have. So that silent struggle is where I needed to make a change. And I had to slow down and pause. And I had to realize and face that, hey, there's a lot of childhood stuff that I didn't really work through. Kind of the baggage that we all kind of carry, and we just kind of like, oh, I'm okay. So that was the beginning of me realizing I'm a lot more than the roles that I play. I don't even know who I am. And there's more that's waiting for me. So in all of that, I'm like, hold on, something's not right. And as I was approaching 40, which is like, these mile marker birthdays, you kind of look at your life. And that's when I started to really finally work on myself and say, hey, I need some help. Because you can be the expert, so-called expert in a lot of things, the perfectionist. I got everything. I'm handling it. Everyone looks at you as like, oh my God, you're like Wonder Woman. You're doing everything. How are you doing it? You look so calm. You look so, and you're like, yeah. And then on the inside, something is just not. So that's the backstory of what was the beginning of something. And I would say it's awakening. Some people may call it a midlife crisis. I don't call it a crisis. It can look like a crisis. It can feel like a crisis.
Yeah.
But it's a much needed life shift.
I love that this is kind of the conversation that we're having, because I feel like facing into the difficult, icky, oh no, I've got work to do moment is so hard. So how did you experience that? Were you like, yay, gung-ho, let's just go for it and do it? Or did you have fear? What was your sensation at the time?
A lot of fear because I started to face, childhood trauma, childhood stories that you don't even know are stories until you're living out your life that way, or you bring those stories into your marriage or into your job or how you parent. And the biggest thing was asking for help.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we think we have to be really depressed or really, really not well to say, hey, I need help. No, I think everybody in every day in every part of their life can say, hey, this is not really working well. Can I get some help? Can I get some advice? And I started to kind of delve deeper into more of the spiritual route because I felt connected to it. I felt aligned to it.
Okay.
And I come from a religious family. My parents were born and raised in India. And they came here about 45 years ago, actually longer than that, almost 50 years ago. So raised in a traditional home in terms of religion. But somewhere along the line, I felt like there was something else that I needed to open my mind to. So I started meditating. I started reading books that talked about other things because I knew that there were other ways of healing besides the traditional. And that one path led to another. And I started connecting with a lot of spiritual teachers and wisdom teachers and shamans who really opened up my world to who I was and who I needed to work through. So that was the beginning of me coming into more of my space of who is Asha. Who is Asha is somebody who is allowed to rediscover herself. That's who is Asha. There's no definition. I get rid of the definition.
Oh, I like that. And I think from what I'm hearing, it's like, you're not about finding another role. You're about like saying the roles are not where we have to play anymore.
Right. Let's stop playing. Let's stop playing pretend.
Yeah.
Let's just be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you finally found that impetus to ask for help, was it forthcoming? Did the universe just go, oh, here's a magic wand and someone is in your life that is here to support you? Or was there a challenge?
It takes you have to take the first step. And I was of the belief of, oh, whatever's meant to happen will happen. And it'll just, if someone's supposed to walk into my life, they'll just walk into my life. Part of that is true. But the other part is you have to choose it. And I needed to take the first step forward before the universe was showering me with like the people that were supposed to be in my life.
Yeah.
So I had to take the first step. I had to say I needed help. I had to go through a lot of spiritual, transformational, mind, body, soul surgery, I would call it, to get to the point of the next phase of my life and making really difficult decisions that many women don't like to talk about. We talk a lot in women's circles, in our close women circle friend group, and then we leave it there. and then we go live our life.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes when we come back to those circles, we either reveal more or we don't. You know, and I was in a lot of circle of friends that everyone was going through the same life stuff. So then it normalizes whatever feels uncomfortable.
Mm.
So what you're unhappy about, often you think, well, if everybody else is going through the same thing, this is life. So
Mm-hmm.
let me just deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Until you get to the point where, no, it's not about just dealing with it. It's like, well, if it makes me uncomfortable or it makes me unhappy, that's the only person that it should matter to.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Can you give us a for instance of one of these topics that you're thinking about that is like behind closed doors? Because I think every woman has just nodded their head in agreement, but also probably is like, am I right? Do I know? So can you, one or two or several, I don't know, any of these topics that are kind of like,
okay,
what is taboo to reveal?
So I will say the big one, which for me, there was a lot of fear. You know, I met my partner at the age of 18.
Wow.
College sweetheart. Everything aligned in terms of who we were as people, our families, and, you know, growing and learning together.
Yeah.
But as you are growing, you know, you're making big life decisions at a very young age, by the way, whether it's a partnership or a job or whatever it is, you're supposed to figure out your whole life at that age, 18 to 25.
Yeah.
So giving yourself permission to say, hey, we are growing, but maybe we are also outgrowing each other in a partnership, regardless of how many years you have been together. Because we often dictate success or relationships based on the number of years you've been with someone. You know, we have these big anniversaries and big mile markers as to say, hey, I made it. And then we think, well, if I've been in something this long, I might as well stick it out.
Sunk cost fallacy, absolutely.
Right? And I was getting to the point where I felt like we were outgrowing each other, but without having the big stories that many people have in terms of when they decide to separate from someone. Yeah. There didn't have to be physical abuse, mental abuse, or yelling and fighting. Like, it doesn't always have to be that as the reason that becomes acceptable to say, hey, I think we're done. You know, of course, there's a lot of things that happen in a marriage where sometimes you lose connection, of course. And that's part of every story. So I don't want to poo-poo that, because yes, that was also in my situation. But I got to a point where I felt like, hey, I am grateful that we had a journey together. And I am blessed that we had children together. But I love you as a friend. And to call it something more than that is being inauthentic to me.
Oh, wow.
Because then there's a role, again, that I'm supposed to play. And I did that long enough now that I can say to you, I appreciate how you are. The things that did not go well in our marriage, that is okay. Because you're coming in with your own stuff and I'm coming in with mine. Yeah. But we can peacefully outgrow each other. I think it's possible. It doesn't happen often. You don't see it often, but I do think it's possible. It's a give and take, and it's a learning curve. But that was a big conversation to have, to tell my partner of 25 years. Ooh. Okay. Right. Of 25 years and 3 children, three teenagers. You know, making a decision like that took many years in the making. Because you don't just make a decision like that. No. And I knew that before I made any decision that was going to affect many people around me, I had to do the inner work first. That took several years before I got to the point where, and the inner work wasn't about my marriage. The inner work was, where am I in myself? For me to stand in my power, for me to say, my choices matter, my decisions matter, my happiness matters. So that decision of saying, hey, I love you as a friend, but I don't have romantic feelings for you. I think it is okay for us to part ways, peacefully co-parent. That is a topic that too many women are afraid to talk about.
Mm.
But after I wrote my book, and I shared a lot in my book about this topic, so many women reached out to me privately and said, thank you for giving me a voice, because I thought it was just me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thank you for showing me that, yes, it's a difficult decision. And yes, it's not easy, but it is possible. Start again. So that was the big one. That was the big like bomb explosion that I experienced. But then the other part is I have 3 children. And coming to terms with, is it selfish? You know, there's a lot of guilt. I just rearranged our whole family foundation, the only one they have ever known.
Yeah.
Is it okay to do that? That requires a lot of self-love to say that the love that I have for myself is greater than the fear. And I'm going to use that now to raise my children in a way for them to see what is authentic living versus what is living in a bubble. Because I don't want them to live the kind of lifestyle. I don't want to preach to them, you should do this, the way society tells us to. I want them to see all of it so that when they grow older, they will make a decision that feels authentic to them. So it's been 3 years since this life transformation. And it wasn't easy, but we have come a long way, and we are all in a much better place now than we were 10 years ago. Let's just say that.
I love it. I love it. And the reality of some of this is like, as women, we tend to care more for other people than we do for our own needs and for our self-invested selfishness. And I think you said, is that selfish? And it's like, we have this negative relationship to selfishness. So what if it's selfish? So what if it's self-interested, self-motivated? Is it going to materially harm your children? That's a different conversation. But there's a difference in saying, okay, so how can I maybe not put myself absolutely number one, if that feels like a stretch for people, but at least put my needs somewhere on this table of all the things that I'm considering, because so many of us don't.
We don't. And, or we wait for, when this happens, then I'll do this. When that happens, then I'll do that. And that's fine to have a plan like that, but sometimes we just keep waiting. And we just keep waiting.
yes. The if then, the when that happens, the whenever. And it's like, what are we waiting for?
And that was actually a conversation that my ex-husband and I had, where it was, why don't we wait until the kids go to college? Okay. Which at that time meant like another 5-6 years.
Ooh.
And I said, that's like putting your life on hold for pretty much the same end result. I said, I can't do that. You know, and for some women, that may feel selfish. I did have a few women say that to me, that it was very selfish of you. And you know what? I appreciate that they said that to me, because it created a conversation.
Right.
So without the conversation, sometimes you don't even know what you don't know until somebody says something. So it created that, and I'm grateful for that. And I expressed myself. And whether they agree or not, it's irrelevant to me.
Totally. Yeah.
What they go home with and maybe think about, and maybe it's a decision that they wouldn't do for themselves, but maybe they're going to have a daughter one day that may make a decision, and they may come from a different perspective. So that word selfish, I think we need to like, you know, take out that negative connotation.
Right. And I don't think my listeners would forgive me if I didn't ask, how did the conversation go with your husband when you brought it, ex-husband, when you brought it to him?
That about my feelings about all, you know, it's never really a surprise. It's not like one person says to the other person, they're like, oh my God.
And the other one's like, I wasn't even anywhere near this thought process. Yeah.
You know, like, yes, it's difficult to hear someone finally vocalize it in a much more serious way.
Right.
You know, but several years prior, he had brought up, hey, the way this is going, it doesn't feel like how it should be.
Mm.
I was on the other end of saying, oh, we're so busy, the kids are so little, it's just life, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a phase. That was
Mm-hmm.
me. Oh, it's
Mm-hmm.
a phase. And then a few years later, he kind of brought it up again, but very like, nonchalant, casual in a way. And I was like, yeah, I know it's just a phase, but everyone's going through it. And that's how I kept like
Ah.
my head just kind of, and then I think for him, he just settled into, I guess this is life, because it's what we saw
Mm.
our parents, it's what everyone around us, talks about in their circles.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he became okay with this is life.
Mm-hmm.
I got to the point where this is not going to be my life. I'm going to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
So when I finally expressed to him, hey, this is where I'm at, it's not that he didn't really know, but it was hurtful to hear
Mm-hmm.
a partner say, hey, I love you like a friend.
Yeah.
That's never easy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was done holding that back.
Mm-hmm. And then how did your children take this kind of news as you delivered it? What was that conversation like?
So, we had both sought guidance prior to telling the kids
Mm-hmm.
in terms of counseling, in terms of speaking to professionals,
Mm.
because we both were on the same page of we want this to be as peaceful as possible.
Mm-hmm.
How peaceful it can be is really relative with every person, but we wanted this to be as peaceful as possible for the kids. And the discussion was for both of us to come up with the story together
Okay.
and
Mm-hmm.
the kids together. It's
Mm.
not a he said, she said. We both shared pretty much our life story as a couple, how we
Yeah.
met, experiences we had together, having
Mm-hmm.
children together, having a friendship,
Mm-hmm.
and then how over time the friendship was a friendship which is still there,
Mm.
but the other parts of our relationship had changed.
Mm.
Um, and so we sat together as a family and we spoke about it.
Mm.
Um, so of course that was painful. That was a very difficult
Mm. Mm.
uh, for three kids to kind of, it was like an out of body experience for kids to hear it, but it's like, is this really happening in my household?
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of tears. Um, and as I'm speaking to you right now, I'm coming from a different space because I think I'm in a different place in myself where at least I can talk about it without crying.
Right.
Because there's been many times where I can't even get the words out.
Yeah.
But I think I'm like this now because I can feel the amazing energy in our home
Mm-hmm.
and where the kids are at.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we did that together as co-parents. And then after that, we went on a family walk, and everybody just needed to do what they needed to do individually.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of a process of there had to be a lot of communication with the children. Like, it's hard enough on yourself, but then to be there for your children when they are also going through the biggest things that they probably will ever go through at that age. It took a lot of energy in this household to keep things going in the direction that we wanted to go.
That's what I'm hearing actually from everything you've said. It's like you got through it, or what you've shared thus far, through this communication, this not trying to sugarcoat it, not trying to be something that you weren't anymore, but actually coming forward with your genuine feelings. It feels like I always sense that unlocks the thing in the other person. It's the thing that kind of shifts into the next conversation because you've been real. And I think realness has a different vibration when you're trying to have these difficult conversations.
Yeah. What happens also is once you let the cat out of the box and you just, there's a freedom that you feel, as heavy and as tough as the entire situation was. And for all those days that I was on the floor crying my eyes out because I'm like, how did I get here? There was a freedom in there of I don't have to pretend anymore. I can just be me now. Regardless of what that version looks like, I was still exploring through that. I could just be me now. However, in that process, as you're making these changes, you are no longer the same person that you used to be. You don't go through these major life changes the same version. And I would hope you don't, because you're evolving. And as you evolve, the people around you now no longer see you the same way. They want to see, some people want to see the old version because that's who they know. That's who they know how to communicate with. That's who they know what to expect with. And when you're no longer that same mold, that's where there's either you're aligning, or you're not aligning. The people who you're not meant to stay with, one door starts to close and another door starts to open. So your community of family and friends begins to shift.
How did you find that? Were you like in a grief process for a bit? I would suspect, for like the loss of something that you may have wanted to lose, because it's a decision that you're making. But how did that feel internally?
It was very difficult because there was a burden that got laid on me, which was, if I made the decision, then I must be happy, right? The perception. So now, not only is it painful for me to have to make this decision because I'm working through guilt, I'm working through the hurt that the family is experiencing, but now there's a judgment of, look at what she did. So who like, I was at the point where, who do I turn to? Right? Who do I turn to now to say, hey, but I'm in pain too? It was very difficult to feel like it was okay to say I'm in pain too at that time.
Right.
Because when you're the one who makes the decision, you own it. And I owned it. It doesn't mean that it was easy.
No.
It doesn't mean that you're not sad about it. You know, it's kind of like when you buy a house or you're moving from one house to another, and there's a reason why you know that you have outgrown your home. But the day you move, you know, there's a lot of memories that you're leaving behind. There's a lot of sadness that you're like, oh my God, thank you for this home. I know I'm ready for the next step, but I'm going to miss this place, you know? And so when you're going through family relationships and a dynamic like that, there's grief there. And it's hard to explain grief in this situation when someone hasn't experienced it. So they're like, no, that's not grief. You didn't lose a family member. I lost a family member. I know what that's like. And you can't compare. So it's not about comparing my grief to your grief. It's just that I'm going through a process that I just need to be and sit in it.
Right.
And it's not pretty, but I need to sit in it, and I need some quiet time, and I need to go in.
So odd. It's like people expect empowerment journeys, which is kind of what you're talking about, this kind of self-sovereignty discovery, and therefore then claiming that self back. People expect you just to be grateful or something, or like happy just because, and they don't necessarily realize how hard it can be. And I think this is something that, you know, people, if they're going through some kind of self-discovery moment and they're feeling that experience of this isn't as rose-tinted glasses as I thought it might be, that's normal. It's not like we don't get the kind of like sunshine and rainbows all the time, especially when we're doing big life-changing things.
Right. You become like an experiment. And I describe it like that because I feel like in that phase, and even now, the people who didn't understand, right, kind of stepped back and now are observing, what is Asha doing? How is this going to play out? And for some women who want to make a change but are afraid to, are observing from that perspective. Other people are observing of, oh, this is a train wreck. Watch this train wreck happen. You know what I mean? Whatever internal story you are carrying is the perspective that you're going to look at it from.
Right.
And the only thing I could do is just keep moving forward for myself and not try to prove anything to anyone. And that is how I've tried to continue forward. And that is where people now are seeing, we're 3 years into it, oh, there is life after. And you are allowed to smile without feeling guilty. You are allowed to enjoy your life without having to say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, that makes you uncomfortable. So whatever this experiment is, the social experiment, I'm grateful to be in it because the conclusion is going to be mine. I'm going to make it. No one's going to make my conclusion for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the conclusion will happen at the end when I take my last breath.
Right, for sure. And that's the other thing as well. Like, talk to me about time, because you mentioned at the beginning, it's like, it's never too late. It's like, why do we have this perception that it is too late? What goes on in women's brains? It's like, oh, well, it's I'm 40, it's too late. What is the thing? And how can we shift our mindset so we don't fall into that trap?
I think there's a few things that happen in terms of family upbringing,
Right.
and conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
In general, women are the nurturers, the givers. For many women, it's natural to be a mother and to care. But then there's this societal way of being of, you are better at being the mom, and the husband is better at being the primary breadwinner.
Yeah.
So in terms of choosing a career, I feel like many women choose a career where they can find a balance. And I did that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like, what career can I choose where I could do what I think I want to do, but then also be a mom, so I can handle both. Many men do not walk into their career thinking, what job can I be a father and a CEO? They don't. So we are programmed into trying to find a balance for all of that. I could be a mom, which I want to be a mom, but I also want to be this. So I think we shortchange ourselves. And in some households, the women, because they genuinely do want to be the mother and the caregiver at home, say, I'm actually okay not working for a few years. I'll be home with the kids. I'll raise the kids.
Yeah.
And their partner's like, yes, I got it. You do you, I'll do this. It's a joint partnership. We're going to work together, which is great when you both are on the same page.
Yeah.
But what I will say is 20 years ago, I didn't know that this is where I was going to be today. I chose a career to be a dentist. There were other job opportunities that were paying more that I turned down because it required me to be in the office a lot longer. And having a spouse who was also a medical professional, there was a juggling act, and I was the one who said, okay, I will not work that job and I will work this job, but I'm grateful that I chose to have a career. Because the financial security is what many women are afraid of making a decision. That, how can I make this decision? I don't have a job, or I don't have enough money to be on my own.
Right.
I've heard that from many women. So there's fears of many things: fear of financial security, fear of, but I'm going to be alone now. My days of dating or my days of meeting people, they're long lost. So I'm going to be alone. I'm not going to have a lot of money. I don't have other luxuries that will give me the opportunity to explore who I am. So all of this inner work, I can't do that now. I have a lot of other things I'm going to have to take care of. So and then like I said before, the fear of judgment when you take that step, and what are other people going to think about your decision? So in a nutshell, so many aspects of fear block you from making a decision. But I will say, if I did not have a career, that would be another big one.
Yeah.
And I know it's probably not politically correct to say, but what I will say to all young girls, you don't know what the future holds. And my mom said this to me, my mom, who came from a very traditional background, born in a village. And she would say to me privately as a teenager, because obviously she knew something. She said to me, Asha, I want you to go to school, get a good job, and don't depend on a man to support you. Now, as a teenager, I didn't even know what that meant. No. I'm like, I'm going to go to school. Yeah, I'm going to go to school. What that meant, I didn't even know how profound that was until this point in my life, where I said, oh my God, I can financially support myself. So I would tell every young girl, choose a career, choose a job. Yes, there's a balance to be had, but don't give that up, because you really don't know.
Yeah.
It's ahead of you.
Yeah. And you don't know when you're going to need option B. It's funny, actually. I think time and like in terms of this, so I was just with my PT and we've only known each other a few weeks, and she just said to me, "You don't have children, do you?" And I was like, "No, I don't have time," because my career is one of those ones where I don't have time. And her comment was, "Well, that's a sad state of affairs," or something like that. And she meant it genuinely. And she, just has different priorities. But I do think there is this real inequality of conceptualization for women almost baked into us out the gate. It's like, oh, bear in mind, you're the one that's going to have to be the one that stays at home, or you're going to have to take the career break, or whatever it is. And people think I'm strange, and people say like, "Oh, you're just so masculine," and I'm just like, and they're not saying it because I am. They're saying it because I'm motivated and I'm committed. I don't have any idea how people have time for relationships and dating. It just seems so time consuming to me when I'm running all of the things that I'm running. But I do think it's this unquestioned infiltration into very early life that we will be the ones that sacrifice.
Yeah, because you know what? That's what we've seen our moms do.
Right.
Because it becomes generational until finally someone along, and everyone makes slight changes in each,
right,
family line. My mom, them moving from India to come here gave me a lifestyle
Huge.
that I wouldn't have had there. Me making my change, is creating, the opportunity to say, hey, you're more than just whatever it is that you think you are. The expectation of you have to have children, all of these rules. Oh, you must not be fulfilled if you don't have children in your life, or you must be lonely if you don't have a man in your life. All of that, is why we choose these certain things to do. It may not necessarily feel authentic. Then we just do it. So, in the workforce, you do you, and when you are a go-getter as a female, there's a different label.
Yeah, there is. And it's interesting because I obviously I'm British, and it's a different scenario here in America, but this same thing travels. It's like this whole women trying to lead things, and you get a reputation.
Right.
And I'm like, right. I don't need the labels. I don't need to co-participate in the narrative that people are creating and making meaning of what it means about me that I don't have children and I choose to spend a lot of hours working. It's like, that's your perception.
Right. And, it's like we got to get to the point of when you are happy within yourself, you can then be happy for other people. But when something in you doesn't feel good, you start projecting that in other ways around you. So when people say things like that, it's because there's something going on in there that they haven't really tapped into or afraid to tap into. So it's easy to say, oh my God, look at you and your job. You're working all blah, 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 blah. And as soon as I start hearing stories like that, in my head, I'm like, oh, okay, something there. And then I'm not going to take it personal. Something is going on in there. When you're ready to face it. And if you're not, you're not. I'm going to keep moving forward.
Right.
But it took a long time to get to this point.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, where do you start? If you're a woman listening to this and some words that you said has triggered this, oh, am I happy? Am I making decisions for myself? What would your advice be about where to start?
I would say, for me, it started when the kids were old enough where I didn't have to be there 24/7 in terms of physical upbringing, and I had a little bit more free time. And when I had the more free time, I didn't know what to do with my free time. Like, what did I enjoy doing? I couldn't even I was like, I don't even know what to do with my time. That was the beginning of me understanding and finally saying something's wrong. I can't make excuses now for why I can't do X, Y, and Z. So I would say for women, tap back into what your joy is. What is your joy? And when you don't know what your joy is, tap back to the young little girl. What did she enjoy doing? What did that little girl enjoy doing before somebody said, don't do that, you have to do something else? And once you start doing that and you start allowing yourself to go back to being the little girl again, that in itself starts to open up your perspective of a lot of other things. So for me personally, as a little girl, I loved dancing. I loved art. I loved writing. I did none of that in my adult life because I was being, quote, an adult. You know, who said being an adult is supposed to be boring? We made being an adult boring, you know, and for the parents who have children, we're so busy running around with them to mommy and me classes and piano and all of these other things because we feel like, oh, they should have these extra worldly experiences. But how about you? Like, why did you stop?
Mm-hmm.
So I started then, you know, my joy for dancing. I joined a Zumba class. This is when I had to get my whole body and everything back into my mind, back into a different state. And that moving my body and dancing, I finally connected back to this body that was only at that point just like a mommy machine. You know, I started writing again for myself, which obviously led up to this book. You know, so there's things that start. You know, you're not going to get the big flower right away. It's the little seed that you got to start watering.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and my love for painting, I just started painting. So I would say for every woman, go back to what your joy is. Tap back into that. You're not meant to live this adult life living a certain monotony of a hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know where that joy is going to lead you.
No, that's true. And any top tips for like silencing the negative voice in your head that is judgmental? Because the sense that I get from you, and maybe this is not the sense that I would have got 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And I know that there will be some women listening going, it's all right for her. She seems super confident. She seems super switched on and super intelligent, and she seems to have it all down. So good for her, not for me. How can we support those women to really feel like, no, this is a for everyone thing? And also, how can we stop these voices of chitter chatter of negative self-talk?
Okay. So first, what I will say is, I went to sleep crying many nights. I think it's about being authentic here. I went to sleep crying many nights. I would cry on the train on my commute so I could get it all out before I walked in the door. So the vulnerability, you know, to look at another woman and say, oh, she's got it, I'm not there. You're seeing a lot of the after, you know, the really raw healing that is needed. We do a lot of that in private. Right. So what I will say is, when you go in those deep, dark spaces, for me, what was a game changer was meditation.
Yeah.
And many people say, but I don't know how to meditate. And we have so many rules about what meditation is supposed to look like, you know, and there's, you know, oh my God, there's a million things going in my head. I can't do it. I'm not comfortable. And I worked with a spiritual teacher and a shaman, and it was about let go of the rules. Close your eyes. I had to hit rock bottom to finally surrender and say, okay, somebody help me. You know what I mean? You don't have to wait to hit rock bottom. There's so many things on YouTube, so many things out there to help you in terms of meditation, in terms of guidance with that. So the quiet in that gave me some semblance of peace. Even if I was meditating for 20 minutes, the 30 seconds or minute of like, oh my God, what was that? Was addictive, because that's when I knew I want to tap back into that space. And I went on many nature walks, being in nature, breathing in the fresh air. That alone time was important. You know, it's very easy to distract yourself, to go out and hang out with people all the time, to drink alcohol, to do the things that seem fun because you don't want to face the other thing. So in order to begin healing, you do have to go there. You do have to face that. You do have to dig into that. It's not easy, but there is a light after that.
I think that's super relevant to make sure people realize it's, you know, the people who write the books are the people who did the hard stuff, not the people who had it innately inbuilt and in-baked. Otherwise the books would be useless. Like, Just Be Awesome is a title. It's not a book. And it's these process. And obviously I am sure the other tip is read your book, because I feel like there's a strange thing happening, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this. I feel like there's a strange thing happening within femininity at the moment. We have some strange waftiness that's happening, like weird, like spiritual stuff And then we have this strange masculine driven stuff and a bit sort of screw you kind of energy. And I'm like, none of this feels feminine to me. And it feels very much like we need voices like yours who speak from a real grounded, solid earth medicine place of femininity. And I'd be interested to hear your take on that to begin with, and any other people that we can read or follow, or any inspirations that you've had on your journey.
So, I was really in my masculine for much of my life because I had to be. It's how I was raised in terms of do.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in New York City. That's a different lifestyle. That's a different environment. So you're constantly doing this. And then as I was making my transition, I went completely into my feminine, and I just follow your heart, which is number one. I would say follow your heart, but then your mind will lead you to the right space once you know where you're following your heart. Finding that balance has been huge. You can't do this journey by yourself. Meaning, we're taught a lot of things in life. We're taught how to take a shower, how to tie our shoes, how to do a lot of things. But then we assume that the biggest life changes we could do by ourselves. So I think you have to let go of being a perfectionist, and ask for help, whether you feel guided towards a spiritual teacher or a good trusted friend or a therapist. Be open to receiving what it is that you need help with, because then that'll let you balance into where you are. Otherwise, you're just kind of, you kind of go back into a cycle. You feel like you're good, and then boom, you're back into something else because it's a pattern. It's a programming that just keeps repeating. It takes time to deprogram. So it's not something that happens like that. But my biggest thing is ask for help. Well, I would go on YouTube, the spiritual teachings. There were several people. If you look at Esther Hicks, I don't know if anybody knows, law of attraction, understanding the law of attraction. I'm like, wait, hold on. Let me listen to what she's saying, because this is a whole other realm she's talking about. Another is a shaman, Riz Mirza in California. He was huge in teaching me meditation and doing a lot of mind, body, soul surgery, which I needed. And then in terms of reading books, I would say, read the topics that you feel like, ooh, I want to know about that.
That's interesting.
I want to know, I'm curious. Wherever your curiosity is, start following that.
Interesting, because I just realized the flaw in my question, because I was like, let's find role models for people to emulate. And that's just being someone else. That's not being you. So I love the way you answer that in terms of, no, find the topics, find the curiosity, for sure. Read people's books, but your entire thing is break molds. Don't just create another one and fit that one instead.
Right. Because we also have to remember, whoever you look at as a hero, we're all here on planet Earth. Even the hero is on a hero's journey, which means they're also learning too. You want to put them on a pedestal. That's you putting them on a pedestal. They're not necessarily saying, I'm on a pedestal, follow me, right? We do that because we're trying to look and find. So give everyone the grace to make mistakes and to fall, because they're learning too. So take the things that you want to learn and then you use that for yourself, but don't try to follow your life based on what somebody else is doing. Everybody's here on a different journey. It's kind of like back in school, everyone was given a different version test. So you can't cheat over the person. You can't cheat with the person next to you because they're taking a different version.
Yeah.
It's the same thing in life. If you're looking at the next person next to you, and you're like, oh my God, they're so far ahead in their life and they're doing this and I'm not, look at where they're living. Look at how their life is. I want to be like that. There's no point in comparing, because they're here on a different journey and you're here on a different journey. If they're on page 20 and you're on page 5, it doesn't mean that they're ahead. They are building a different masterpiece than you. So your own, create your own, and then you move on to the next one. It's like a connected dots. 1, 2, and then 3 could be all the way over there. Don't try to figure out what the next step is. Just follow one by one.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, boom, there's a picture. And you're like, oh, this is nice. I'm going to go create another one now.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love this. And I feel very much like there's this intentionality behind what you say to reconnect women to themselves, to really have them find the spark that for so many women has died somewhere, or at least is very, very dim.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I had early on a few people said to me, oh, good luck finding yourself. Good luck finding yourself, Asha. And I couldn't even explain, because it wasn't worth the energy. I couldn't even explain, actually, I opened the door to my home now. Now I've opened the door to my home. So now I'm living from that. I'm not searching. I'm like, oh, I'm going to be here now, because for so long I was locked out.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that's a really interesting thing. And to note for our listeners, Asha didn't say that she went to India and sat in an ashram for 17 months. And she didn't say that she went off on some pilgrimage of, I don't know, whatever. You just came back to yourself. And that feels like actually the easy option, the free option, and so much more rewarding. This isn't about going and finding yourself. It's about stopping and finding yourself oftentimes.
Right. And, you know, it's easier to be a monk in a mountain, because you're not around things that can trigger you, because you're in your own space.
Yeah.
When you are now living in a society, when you're living in the same environment that technically broke you, or, you know, that's difficult, and you're trying to heal in that same environment, that's a different level of healing. So I would say, don't escape. You're going to sit in that, you know, whatever, you know, there's a saying, a book I read, no mud, no lotus. The lotus comes from the mud.
I like that.
Oh, it's a great book. No mud. Yeah, that's the name of it.
I'll pop it in the show notes for everyone. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So from that beautiful lotus, but it came from the mud. You're going to have to go in there, in that deep, dark space, before you begin to do that. And so that's what I would say. Don't be afraid of that. What happens after that is amazing and beautiful.
I love it. And I love your just innocent joy and passion. It's infectious. And I feel like the people around you who may have changed, undoubtedly have changed since who they were 4 years ago, 3 years ago, are very lucky to have you kind of like being this trailblazing example of self and just relentless commitment to showing up as who you are.
Oh, thank you. You know, the only thing I'll say is, when I look at my kids, you know, and they were the number one reason why it took me forever to say, can I choose myself finally? And they say to me, and these are teenagers, you know, when you're a teenager, the life is about you, right? And they said, Mom, we're so proud of you. Like, you know, you don't live your life for validation, but it feels good when you know that you can make decisions that are going to be difficult, but it doesn't mean that they're wrong. And so for any female, male, whatever it is, just because it's difficult to make the decision, that's not a signal that it's wrong. It just means you have to look at it and really sit in there and work on yourself before you make any big decision.
Oh, thank you, Asha. Is there anything else that you would like to share or ask of my audience before we close for today?
You know, I would just say this: life is beautiful. It is magical. Smile every day, laugh. Don't take life so seriously. You know, I think we just take everything so seriously. Laugh, be the kid in an adult body, and just live your best life. Give yourself permission to live your best life. You deserve it.
I love it. You do deserve it. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, Asha. I have enjoyed every second of this conversation, and I'm sure our listeners have too.
Thank you, Victoria.
What an awesome and inspiring episode. I loved talking to Asha. All of the links that you need are in the show notes, including links to her website, her Instagram, and of course the Amazon link to her book, Who Is She? Don't hesitate to reach out to Asha directly if you'd like to just share some love, share what inspired you from this episode. I am sure she would be delighted to hear from all of the Unveiled podcast listeners. And with that, all that remains is for me to say thank you for listening, and I look forward to being with you again next week.